Welcome to the second Cooking with Fire. This is a new series that we started with the area fire department houses here, and we had a lot of fun on the first one, so we're doing it again. Today we're at the Blackwell station, and with me I have Jess Connor and Arnie Segura. And guys, how long have y'all been with the fire department? Let's start with you, Jess.
I've been here about a year.
About a year?
Yeah.
I've been here with Kerrville for 5 years. Did 2 years before that with Odessa.
All right. What are you guys going to be cooking today?
I'm going to be cooking the main entree. I'm going to be cooking some carne guisada, and one of my sides I'm going to make is chorizo with beans.
All right.
And then Arnie's special name he came up for mine was Uncle Jess's Southside rice. So we'll call it that if you want. That's what I'm going to be making, some Spanish rice.
Talk a little bit about cooking. Now, do you do a lot of cooking with the house here? Do you cook for everybody, or how does that work?
It goes on a rotation. There's 5 of us here at the station, so every day that we're on shift, one of us brings for that day. We either can cook a breakfast, lunch, or dinner. 2 out of those 3. We don't cook every single meal, but at least 2 out of those 3 things we will cook for the day.
So at least most of the time it's breakfast. We've been doing breakfast and dinner lately, and it's working out pretty well.
Do you guys have a favorite dish, or do y'all worry about that? Is it just what you get?
You have your go-to meals when you're cooking for the guys. So a lot of times when you look at the schedule ahead to see how busy you're going to be, you know whether you're going to have more allotted time to try to cook. But if you know you're going to have your busier days, you can stop and pick up something to go sometimes, or just tell the guys, hey, we're going to be doing cold sandwiches for lunch today. So
yeah, it's usually, I don't know, some of the guys bring some pretty good meals. Arnie makes these street tacos. Oh, they're good. We made a honey sriracha salmon last shift. I got the recipe from a fellow guy here, and it came out pretty good. Everybody was, we usually eat pretty well, unless Johnny brings, and not so much.
That's when we're going to have corn dogs and tater tots.
Yeah.
So how long is it going to take to cook the meal today?
Today's meal, without interruptions, should be an hour and a half or so, right around there.
Yeah.
Rice can just come right along with it, so total prep time and cooking time. We already got some of the stuff prepped, so that alleviates some time, but if you're doing it at home, maybe 2 hours. The main protein for this carne guisada will be beef. I'm using the Texas beef style ribs for this. I already cut up some, but I'm going to go ahead and show you how I do the rest of it. So essentially, you want to cut these about 3/4 of an inch to an inch squares. And try to be uniform if you can, that way it all cooks together about the same rate. I'm cutting off the little excess fat, you don't really need it. One thing that will help out in the future is if you do get meat that has a little bit of fat in it, that way you don't end up using so much vegetable oil as you're cooking. As you can see, try to average it out. About 1 inch cubes if you can, 3/4 of an inch. Also, you don't have to go this big. I prefer to go this big because it just gives you a bigger chunk to eat. If you go smaller, of course, the meal's going to cook a lot quicker. So if you don't have that much time, that might be a better option there. Jess, can you turn on the pot there? Jess is turning on the pot. That way it can start heating up. We're not going to add any oils or anything right now. What we're going to do is we're just going to turn on our pot, and we're going to throw the meat in there with our seasonings. We'll go over those here in a second. All we're going to do is we're going to let it boil up. All the excess water that's going to come off the meat there is going to essentially let it soften up and let the meat get tender. So all we're doing over here is we're just going to add the meat to this pot, and in a while we will add the seasonings here in a second. Alright, so now we're going to start off with all the seasonings. If you don't have fresh garlic, you can always use garlic powder, but since we went and got some fresh garlic heads, and we're going to be chopping those up for our seasonings to be going in there. While Jess works on chopping those up, we're going to be adding just salt and pepper to our meat over here so it can cook with the seasonings. This is half a teaspoon, so we're probably going to go with 1 teaspoon for right now in there. Same thing with the salt. Go with 1 teaspoon. One thing I always tell the guys as I'm cooking, or as I'm showing them how to cook my recipes, is you can always add seasoning to it. You just can't take it away. So.
You want this minced, or how do you want it?
Just chopped up.
Doesn't have to be too fine.
No, not too fine. So, we're going to let this build up some heat and start cooking in there. Once Jess is done with this garlic, we will add it to it. How many heads have we done? We're going to do a total of 3. 2. So 1 more. You know, the guys ask me all the time where I got this recipe from. I actually got it from my mom. As I was growing up, I enjoyed her cooking, and hence the reason I got my size the way I am. But I wanted to learn how to do it, so I just naturally just would watch her. My mom's not the best teacher at it, because kind of like me, not very good with words, so it's more of a showing thing. If you show someone how to do it, I'm one of those learners. I learn better that way. So that's where I got my recipes, and anything I cook at the fire station, it's usually from just watching my mom. So I went about it that way. Alright, so we're going to turn the heat up a little bit, medium high on here, and let this start breaking down all those juices so it can start cooking on its own. I already have some water going here in a, I would imagine probably 2-quart little pan. I'm going to be making my sauce to give it the heat and some flavors to this meat later on that we're going to be using. So to do that, I just have some Roma tomatoes here, and we'll start prepping these here in a second. We'll also be using some jalapenos, some onion, and cilantro for that. So we're going to prep these tomatoes. One thing I like to do is I always like to take out this little top part of the stem, just cut it out, and it helps it when you're actually cooking them. What would you call it, Jess? When are they parched when you want to boil it long enough where the skin falls off? Is that what it's referring to?
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Anyways, we're going to boil these tomatoes long enough to where the skin begins to fall off and they're soft. Maybe blanched, I guess is the other word.
I want fancy cooking words.
Johnny, got a question for you.
Johnny. He ran away.
Maybe Mitch would know. Afternoon, Chief.
I'm early, huh?
Yeah, we're right in the middle of it right now.
Hungry too, man.
Well, you start smelling it here in a little bit. We're gonna go with these 4, Jess. So we'll add these to the water that's already kind of steaming for us. We're gonna turn it up to a boil now. These jalapenos, I just chop the ends off. That way they can actually sink there, just not floating on top of the water.
If you like spicy food, this man knows how to make some hot food. Well, you used to always make fun of that one guy because he'd always have to go get a glass of milk after eating your meals.
Yeah. As we're eating, he said he would always tell us he'd get thirsty and just have to drink some milk. We knew the truth though. One of the other things I add is some onion to it. I just cut off a little bit of onion. You'll see on the recipe, this water will also be used later on for a carne asada to give it some of that flavor. So it's best to start getting your flavor already going in there. We're going to chop off some cilantro. This doesn't have to be very fine. Like I said, this is going in there, so just cut it up some. We're gonna let this come to a boil. Same thing, we're gonna add another teaspoon of salt to that salsa we're gonna make. And to here, we're gonna add the remainder of our garlic. Where'd you leave it? Which is 2 heads, and that will go right in there. So right now, we'll wait for stuff to get going, and we'll be back in a minute. So now that we have our water boiling here, these vegetables that we're going to have here for our salsa, we're going to let it go a few more minutes. What we're going to be looking for, remember earlier how we were talking about those tomatoes, as soon as the skin begins to fall off, all we're really trying to do is soften up those tomatoes and these jalapenos enough where they'll blend easier in the blender here in a second, and that'll make our salsa. We've had to open up a window because these peppers are starting to give off their aroma. Next, as you can see right here, our pot is giving up plenty of steam, which means it's cooking. I'll bring it over here so you can see a little bit better picture. You can see in there, it's cooking in its own juices, and all those flavors are starting to marinate in there. We want to cook it at a high heat right now so we can soften up the meat. Later on, we'll give it a little bit of a fry to give it a little bit of a crunch, but for the meantime, we'll just continue as is. This doesn't have much longer to go. Like I said, I'll give you one right here, a little example of one, because it's almost to that point. Notice how the skin is falling off of that one. And if you were to touch it, you would actually be able to mush it down a little bit. I'm not going to mush it down right now because it's still really hot, but it's almost there to that point. What were you asking me earlier, Jess? I don't know if you can remember, but that way we can let the people know, because they're good questions.
Oh, whenever you're making your salsa, do you just pour all that into the blender, or do you strain it, or what?
So you don't. Try to have a spoon that has holes in it. That way you can scoop everything out. This juice that's in here, remember, it's all seasoned. We're going to use this juice, or water per se, to thicken up our sauce later on. So it's just more flavors that continue to make the dish taste better.
So what do you do with that to put it into your hot sauce? Do you strain it, or do you just pour it all into the blender?
So with this, try to get yourself a spoon that has the holes already in it, because you are going to be straining everything out. You want to save this water for later on, because it's going to be the liquid that we use to kind of make our gravy in there. You can always use regular old water, or use the water that you use to make your salsa, which already has all the flavors of it, which just enhances it more to make it taste better, I think. So, I've done it both ways, where I accidentally throw away my water, and I'll just end up using water. You have to use more salt and pepper and other ingredients to try to bring that flavor back. But if you can remember to save it, that's what we're going to use it for. And I'll bring it over here so we can get a look at it, but this is done. Whew. So I'll bring some up so you can see here. These tomatoes here, see how the skin's falling off of all these tomatoes? All the peppers have been in that boiling water long enough to now where they're soft. We're not really worried about the cilantro and the onions. All that is in there for flavor. So now, next step, we'll be going to the blender. I'm going to let this cool down a little bit so it's not so hot when it goes into the blender. Alright. So now we're back. This is our other firefighter here, Juan Rodriguez. Same thing, he rides the ambulance or the fire truck. Today he happens to be on the ambulance, so we're lucky to have him here, that he's not on a call, but that can change at any minute. So Johnny, in the mornings, what time do we get here in the mornings?
You get here, we're supposed to be here by 7 a.m., but if you're not here 15 minutes early, you're late.
Oh, so that's a good rule of thumb, huh?
Yes,
Try
sir.
to be here early.
Yes, sir.
Alright.
I live it, preach it.
You live it and preach it, don't
Live it
you?
or preach it.
Alright, and once we get here, what's our regular rotations and like our stuff. What do we do here when we get here?
Well, we definitely get here and we gotta check our trucks, make sure everything's in working order, and if not, we need to replace stuff, we'll replace stuff, and we got morning duty, sweep, mop, and just kind of tidy up the station area, get ready for the day that we're gonna be here.
Yeah, the previous shifts, they do a really good job of always leaving it clean and ready to go for us, because when we show up, we got to be ready to go to respond to any call. So we really don't want to be in that process of sweeping and mopping, doing that stuff. So they leave the station ready for us to go to start our day off from 7 o'clock, and sometimes earlier if we're here earlier to start going on our calls. But we'll continue here in a second, Johnny. I'm going to go ahead and go and all right, continue on here with my salsa. Don't take off too far, man. All right, so now it's time to make our little salsa. As we talked about earlier, go ahead and strain out all of the water out of the vegetables, tomatoes and onions, jalapenos. Some of it might go to the water. It's okay, nothing wrong with that. So let's just do that right now. Get it all into our blender.
Smells good from right here.
Yeah, today's gonna be a spicy one. And usually when I do cook here at the stations, the guys for the most part don't mind it hot. Tell you a story, last time, or not last time, but one of the previous times I made this meal here at the fire station, a few years ago actually, I made it pretty hot. Long story short, the guy would not stop eating though, even though his lips were burning. A few days later when we came back on our ship, his lips were chapped, like if they had gotten sunburned. But like he was saying while he was eating, oh God, this is so hot. So he kept eating it. That was a good sign to me that at least it tasted good. All right, we got all our stuff in there, so now, real simple, we're just gonna blend this up. And there it is. I myself prefer it to be a little bit chunky as to real fine. That way when it mixes up into our carne guisada, you can actually see some of the peppers and tomatoes and stuff. Nothing wrong with it if you over blend it. It's just a preference there. Nothing really there. We're gonna go ahead and check up on our meat again. Give it a stir.
Getting there.
I'll let y'all see a picture of it here in a second. So as you can see here, we have all this juice down at the bottom. That's what's helping the meat cook. Remember, we're trying to get it soft right now because this Texas style rib, I believe that was the meat I got. It's a tougher cut of meat, so you do want to soften it up as much as you can. But that meat, that water in that meat is slowly evaporating. So once you can tell later on that most of that water's gone, that's when we're going to add our vegetable oil, and then that's when we're going to try to give it, try to fry up the meat in there a little bit. But we got a little bit of time to go till we get there, so we'll be back in a few minutes again. Continuing on with our day, Johnny, after we do our morning chores, what else would we be doing in the mornings?
We usually, if we have, some studying to do, we go ahead and try to get that knocked out of the way, or there's various stuff. A lot of times the ambulance is usually running calls and busy, but we just try to keep busy doing stuff around the station. On Saturdays or Fridays we have yard care that we have to do. Different days we have a chore list we have to do every day, and we try to knock them out as quick as possible.
So to add to that, Johnny, we could be going to school functions. I know when we have the fire safety month, we go to schools and do that, presentations for the little kids, starting from pre-K all the way up to middle school. I don't believe we do high schools.
Yeah.
For high school, we do the Shattered Dream projects out there with them. We go out and put out those mock recs and do that. I know Johnny mentioned we do the classes. Sometimes we have classes that last all day, so we'll be attending those classes. And during those classes, we still have to continue to do our job. So if a 911 call were to come in, we go out and do that. What's our coverage in this area? Where would we respond to, John, if we had to go somewhere?
We cover a lot of each station is zoned in different parts of the town. We have a pretty big, significant part of the town from like Woodlawn all the way west towards Hunt, Mountain Home. It's a pretty big area to cover.
But essentially, we can also cover the entire county because some of the ambulances go out of service on calls. So our district is what Johnny was referring to, from Woodlawn out all the way out to the Garden Store, the whole west side of the Kerr County. So that's the extreme, going out to the Garden Store. But at the same time, we'll cover all the way out to Comfort, and sometimes on 83, is that the highway that goes north on Comfort?
Yeah.
We first respond out there, or not first respond, we mutual aid to one of the areas out there that's actually still Kerr County, so we go all the way out there. So essentially anywhere in Kerr County is where we can respond to from this station, just like every other station in the city can as well. Is there certain days of the week that you would say are busier, certain times of the month, year that you would say were busier, Johnny?
Initially I thought there was, but it's different all the time. It's hit or miss. Some days are good, some days are worse than others, and you know, as long as you don't appreciate your lack of sleep, you'll be all right.
Because we are here for those 24 hours, so we in the afternoons, after all our chores and all our daily duties are done, we try to rest, because we know that a lot of our calls do tend to come at nighttime, so we try to be ready for that. We're going to let Jess take over. I know he's been prepping his stuff for his rice. So Jess, do you have any, can you go ahead and let us know what you're doing here?
Yeah, so start off, we're making a Spanish rice. I'm making about 2 cups of rice, and the ratio is one that my wife has told me, and it's easy just to stick to it because you won't mess it up. So for every cup of rice, you do 2 cups of water. So with 2 cups of rice, I'm gonna do 4 cups of water. You start off with a little olive oil. I mean, you just put a little splash in there, maybe a little bit more. And all you're doing with that is just so you can brown the rice.
You want to go ahead and show them over there, Jess?
So I just put a little bit of oil. And then I got my 2 cups of rice. You just pour it in there. And you put it on the stove top. Usually you want to start about a medium high heat just to get it going. Kind of get that rice even around. It takes a little bit longer for it to get brown at first, especially when you're cooking with a cast iron like we are. But once it gets going, it's pretty quick. And then just add, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a whole can of tomato sauce in. I put a little bit of chicken bouillon in there, just gives it a lot of flavor. And then some ground cumin with a little bit of salt, just helps out a little bit. These are just the recipe my wife taught me. It's the easiest, you can't really mess it up. You just throw it in there. Once you get it brown, you put a lid on and turn it on like a medium to low heat. Leave it alone. After you put the water in, you don't touch it. If you touch it, that's when it gets all mushy and...
Don't stir rice.
Don't stir it. I got yelled at by my wife. She literally got mad at me for stirring the rice.
And so like we see here, I went ahead and poured out the salsa that we made earlier. You can see it's a little chunky. I said my preference there, so that's why it looks like that.
All you do is just let this get hot and just start stirring it around. You'll see, I'll show you in a moment when it starts to brown, so you can kind of see what I'm talking about, browning the rice.
you to be good for a second, just
Yeah.
so I can show them something.
Yeah, I gotta start getting hot.
This last time I stirred the meat, I'm going to go ahead and show y'all what I'm talking about. Most of the water's starting to go. So when you look down there, it's starting to actually thicken up. Kind of almost make its own gravy. That's a good point to let you know that it's almost to that point where we do have to add our vegetable oil. So we'll let this continue going. We're on the right track. So now most of the water has evaporated out of here. Our meat is fully cooked at this point. You could actually eat this as like that if you wanted to, but we're not making that kind of tacos today. We're making carne guisada. So we're going to add some vegetable oil here to it now. Usually I would do this all over the stove, but so you can see. And there's really no science to this. I go by eyesight. If I had to give it a number, I would say maybe 2 tablespoons of vegetable oil, what we're going to put in there. Like I said earlier, if you get a piece of meat that's marbled or has, you can do this not only with beef, you can do it with pork. Chicken's a little bit more difficult just because it has the bones, and because if you use chicken breast, it's really dry. You're not going to get much meat out of it. But depending on the meat you use, like if I were to use pork, I get the pork ribeyes. Those work perfect because they give off a lot of fat. You really don't have to use any vegetable oil on it. But anyways, let's get this back on the stove. We're going to fry up the meat a little bit, and then we're going to start to make our gravy so we can get the process going. Jess, are you almost ready to go over there with the rice?
It's getting there. It's just taking a little longer to get this browning going. It's getting there, slowly but surely.
So
Rice is it's an art. You gotta take time.
you can start to hear the oil heating up over here and starting to fry up some of this meat. So we'll go ahead and continue that over here. I'm actually going to take the lid off now, because I no longer have to keep the water in there. That way I can keep a better eye on it now. You don't want to fry it up too much, because then you're going to have the meat starting to stick on the bottom of the pot and make a mess.
Smells good. That'd go good with breakfast. What about some eggs?
So, funny that Jess mentioned that. That's actually what I always tell the guys after, because we always end up having some leftovers, and that's what we do the next day. If we wake up early enough, we'll go ahead and fry up some eggs and then just throw the carne asada on top of the eggs for a quick breakfast.
Now there are some guys that can make some pretty good breakfast here.
After cooking this long enough, you can start to smell and kind of get the feeling if you need to add some more salt to it. So I'm going to go ahead and add another teaspoon of salt to this. I guess if you're adding up right now, it has 2 teaspoons of salt so far. We're going to go ahead and add another teaspoon of the pepper. Give it a stir.
See, if you look right here, you can see how it's already kind of browning a little bit. It just needs a little bit longer. You want to try to get it pretty brown throughout. So it's cooking a little slow, but it'll be worth it. I bet your wife made you work this whole time.
Yes and no. At the house, like my little girls they don't handle heat very well. You'd be surprised, actually, my littlest one, her name's Rosie. Hi Rosie, if you see this. She can actually handle more heat than my older little girl. So I'm going to go ahead and add a little bit more vegetable oil. You'll see down there, you separate all the meat off to the side, and then you'll have, if you ever made gravy, you know how you would use the bacon fat to make your roux, per se. I move everything off to the side so I can have a little bit of room to work with here. And I can see how much vegetable oil I actually have to make that roux. That's not enough for me, so I'm going to add a little bit of vegetable oil down there. Probably another tablespoon or so. And that should be plenty. So again, if you're adding at home, 3 tablespoons of vegetable oil there will do it. Again, also you have to be mindful of how much meat you're using. For today, I think we're cooking 3.5 pounds of meat, so to give you an idea of how much we're using. Same thing, we're going to wait for this to heat back up, and we'll get back to you here in a minute. Jess, are you ready to go?
Yeah, it's there.
Okay, so Jess is going to continue on with his rice over there.
So it's pretty brown throughout everywhere, so I'll just bring it over here and I'll add the water over there so I don't have to carry that. So always I start with the tomato sauce first. The best sound ever. And then you really can't go wrong with this chicken bouillon. It gives it just a lot of flavor. I'm real bad with measurements on cooking. I don't ever use any measurements. I just kind of throw it in there and say that's enough.
No pinch? No kazam? Ka-chow?
Ka-chow.
There you go.
There we go. Is that what you wanted, Arnie? Johnny says it better. And then once you get that, go ahead and pour the water in there.
Man, you're messy, Joe.
That's alright. Johnny will clean it later. And I just stir it around just to get everything mixed around.
Well, I thought you said not to stir, Justin.
I stir it one time.
Okay.
Right as soon as it started, then I leave it alone. Turn it down to like a medium to low heat. Cover it and walk away.
Don't walk away, huh?
Don't touch it.
Alright. So, now that Jess has this going, I can continue on over here with mine. Another ingredient we're going to be needing a little bit of flour. I'm going to shake off some excess flour. I don't want to make a mess over here. So again, this one, I don't have the exact measurement, but I'll do it over here for y'all so you can kind of get the idea of when I know if I have enough flour in there or not. I always go back to that gravy reference. So if you ever made your own homemade gravy at home, that roux, that's how you want to have it thick right before you add your milk to it. You can also see the color of this meat now that it had a little bit of a chance to fry up in that vegetable oil. You can see it, it's brown now, that dark color brown. This meat is super soft right now, which is what we want. We want it cooked and soft and a little bit of crispiness on the outside, right? So we moved everything to the side now so we can actually see our vegetable oil down there at the bottom because we want to make sure that that flour can actually make direct contact with that, right? So I'm going to do 1 tablespoon, start off with a tablespoon and see how much more we need. I'm going to add it right there, right in the middle of it. And start to stir it around in there. I'll put this back on the heat so that I don't lose all this heat buildup I got in there. I can already tell it's not going to be enough, but I'll come back over and show you guys here in a second. So as we can see, it's not enough because I can still see vegetable oil flowing around freely in there. We want it to start thickening up. So we'll go ahead and do another tablespoon in there. Just drop it on in because we're going to be stirring it all around. So let me take it back to the heat and I'll be right back, okay? This process here, you will actually have to kind of move along because once it starts to thicken up, you want to get some water and your hot sauce in there all at the same time. You Keep stirring it around because you want that flour to actually get coated on most of the meat if you can. Probably going to put a little bit more on there. If you look at the bottom, all that vegetable oil has soaked up most of the flour already. From experience, I know that I'll probably need just a little bit more, so I'll go ahead and add it right there. And we'll get it back on here. I'm going to lower the heat. You really don't want any more heat on this right now. Keep stirring it around, keep stirring it around.
What is adding that flour to it help do?
So, essentially, it's just a thickening agent.
Yeah.
Kind of like with gravy. It's just a thickening agent. So I'll come back and show you right now. This looks a little weird. The meat, you can tell it has the flour around it right now. There's no more vegetable oil at the bottom because the vegetable oil has all soaked into the meat with the flour. So now that we're at this point, that juice that we saved earlier from our hot sauce, we're going to add a little bit. So let me grab a little ladle here. I'm going to scoop out some of that water and add it right into there. Okay? We don't want to add too much. I'll show you. Kind of like when you make that gravy, you want to get it just to the point where it's starting to thicken up a little bit because we're going to add our hot sauce to it. We'll bring the heat back up now that we have water in there. Again, start to stir this around. I'll go ahead and show you right now. Before we start cooking it, it looks real watered down. Just watered down. But once it starts to cook a little bit more here, it's going to start to thicken up. Nothing wrong with that. Like I said, a lot of stuff's happening right now, but this is where all the flavor and the good stuff comes in. So continue with that, continue with that. It doesn't take very long. I'll show you here in a second, again, how quick it starts to thicken up on it. So you bring it over here and you can actually see there's not much liquid that falls out. This is where we're going for. We're aiming to try to get it to this spot. See, it's real gooey. Now we can add our hot sauce to it. And when I say hot sauce, we're going to add it all. So right now we'll add it all to it. Remember, this hot sauce has water on it on its own. So it's going to help it not be so thick, but to start to break down some of that flour, so it's going to be a little bit thicker, or I'm sorry, not so thick. I'm going to bring it over so y'all can actually get a look at this. So here we see after we added all that hot sauce to it, see, you can see some of the skin still from the tomato, some of the peppers and cilantro, all that stuff. That's how I personally like it myself. Like I said, if you blend up that hot sauce, over blend it, there's nothing wrong with it. It's just preference deal. So what we're going to do now is we're going to let this go sit back on the stove. We're going to add a little bit of water now that we saved. Remember that water that we saved? Ounces, sorry. Probably another 6 ounces of water or so to it. And right now, if you were to look at it, which I'm going to show you, it looks real liquidy. But as you know, like when you cook gravy, it thickens up as it gets heated up. So right now, yes, it looks real liquidy, but let's give it a little bit of time and see what happens, right? I'm actually going to probably just add the rest of the water to this.
Let it cook over. It'll cook out anyways, won't it?
And the last thing that I'm going to be adding to this is a can of tomato sauce. So I'm going to have Jess here open that up for me. And that can of tomato sauce really isn't, of course it's going to have tomato flavor, but a lot of the reason I put it in is to give it that color. The color, you know, you're accustomed to seeing when you see carne asada. So I'm going to bring this up to a boil so we can start cooking that flour and thicken it up. And this whole, I have pretty much all of it. But I'd say a number probably like 90% of it. I don't know why I always end up throwing a little bit of it away. It's just habit. One of our other sides are beans and...
You want any cast iron?
Same thing, I learned this recipe from my mom. It's not really a fancy recipe. All I gotta do is open up a package of chorizo, which Jess will do here. And you can use any type of refried beans you choose. I choose to go with Goya, the ranchero style ones. They already have a lot of the flavors, like from the jalapenos, and I believe they cook them with onions. But anywho, if you were to choose the other ones, they work just as well. I've done them with both, but it's just my preference on those. So all we're going to do with the chorizo is just fry it up for a little bit. I'm waiting on the carne guisada stew, essentially over here, to start boiling, so it will thicken up on us. Another thing you could do for this carne guisada is you could add potatoes to it if you're going to be feeding a lot of people. A filler, essentially, but it tastes really well. I put that smasher. How's your rice coming along, Jess?
Looks good. I ain't touching it though. It ain't tricking me now.
Can you pass me a little spoon there? I'm going to go ahead and test the carne guisada. You can test it, because right now is the time where you can add more salt and pepper, those kind of things. Remember, you can always add, but you can't take away. Whew. We really don't need to add too much to it right now. It's actually tasting pretty good.
Spicy?
I've made it spicier before, but it's a good heat.
Like a cup of milk spicy?
No, you don't need milk. I'm going to bring it over so you can see kind of how it's going right now. It's right about to start boiling, so as I move it around, you can see it's still real liquidy, but as it starts to boil and heat up some more, it'll start to thicken up. One of the other things I like to do for the guys is I chop up a little bit of cilantro and onions. That way as they're making their tacos, if they choose to make tacos, they can add it in there. So, I won't do it right now because we're finishing this up, but just another thing to do for a little garnish deal.
Turn this down just a little bit.
So this has started to boil. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to lower the heat down to medium. I'm going to let this simmer here for about 20 to 30 minutes, and it's just going to sit there in its own flavors and keep cooking and thickening up at the same time.
And you got that John boat from Johnny, and you had to pull us in because we ran out of juice.
Yeah, these guys ran out of battery on
The battery died on us. We were about halfway out on a lake at Flat Rock, and we didn't have any paddles, so it was kind of like, what do we do? So we were yelling. Arnie was over there fishing away, and we were yelling at him from across the lake. Hey, come pull us in! It was. Other than that, it's, you know.
I'm actually glad this happened right now because it happens every now and then. If you don't add enough flour at the beginning, when we start to make that little gravy, kind of like right now, it's not going to thicken up enough, I can already tell. What I do in this situation is I heat up some vegetable oil. I'm just going to pop it in the microwave real quick, add about another tablespoon. Go pop this in the microwave, heat it up for about 15 seconds. It doesn't take very long. And I'm going to make a quick little roux, and we'll just add it right into it, and it'll cook up. you just take that vegetable oil once they got heated up real quick. Just mix it up real quick, and there's just flour. You might ask me, why don't I just throw the flour directly in there? If you do, which I've done and I learned from experience, you end up having little nuggets of flour that don't dissolve all the way in there. So I found out if you dissolve it in oil first, it tends to make it a little bit better. Just throw it all in. Same thing, we're going to bring it right back up to a quick boil and let it start cooking again. Jess is adding now the beans to the chorizo. Everything there is essentially cooked. All we're going to be doing that with the beans now is just simmering, letting it heat up. But this is ready to go as well. But since we're not ready to eat yet, I'm going to leave it on the stove on the lowest heat setting and just let it sit here to stay warm. Jess, how close are you on your rice? Don't want to burn the rice, Jess. Don't start over from scratch. Woo, Jess.
Say it's looking pretty good. Definitely getting there.
How would you check for that, Jess, to see if it's done?
I just go, it's about done. I don't know,
Right.
you're the expert.
I'll show you the
You're
trick.
the expert.
I'll show you the trick that I learned. Remember, we're not going to stir it.
Fluff it.
We're going to kind of fluff it. So I'll show you over here real quick.
Fluff.
Remember, all you're doing is you're pretty much cooking it until all the rice water is gone. So you just make a little opening there. And if we look at the bottom, there's no more water left in there. So this rice is done. Even though it's your recipe, I think it's done.
If you say it's done already, I'll listen to what you say. Sound like my wife. It's done. Turn it off.
You're probably right.
Yeah.
We're gonna let this stuff simmer for about another 10 minutes. The only things left now to do is heat up some tortillas, chop up the cilantro and onions, and cut up a few pieces of lime. And next time you see us here in a little bit, we'll have that dinner table set up and you'll watch us eat. We like to do that. All right.
Well, we want to thank you for joining us for another episode of Cooking with Fire. Guys, we sure did appreciate the hospitality you showed us here. And food looks great, so let's dig in.
One more thing. I gotta say hi to my little girl in second grade at Starkey. Her name's Lily. Hi, Lily. I didn't forget you.
We'll all say hi. Hi, Lily.
Hi, Lily. Oh, no, I said hi to Lily.
All right. Careful, because it's gonna be hot.